Woohoo! I did it right.
You
Woohoo!
did.
All right, that's exciting. How are you,
I'm,
Mr. Forge?
I'm doing very well, Mr. Hunter. I like your theme song. It's very True Blood. I want to do bad things to you. It brings back memories.
I think when I made it, True Blood was the thing, and so I had that like vibe going on, and I was working it, and I thought, you know what? I mean, the actual show theme song for the podcast is it's got like fun little snippets, voice snippets from like movies and stuff. It's pretty cool. So if you haven't heard that, you should just download the Modern Witch podcast on whatever podcast platform you prefer, because and then give me 5 stars.
Absolutely.
Because you're a nice person.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to have you back on, and in this format, because you've been on, of course, as a vocal guest on the
Yes.
podcast, but now to have you in video is much better, because now the audience is going to get to see your face squirm, and that's very important.
Yes. And,
Yeah.
and I am overall pleased with my face, so I'm happy to share it.
There you go. See, confidence that's another Virgo thing. So today I'm really interested on this Virgo topic, mostly because you were chosen as the representative for Virgos by the amazing Evo Domingos Jr., who is, as we live and breathe, one of my favorite people to exist on the planet. So I will just trust his guidance. But I want to know, first of all, what made you so special that you were the chosen representative for all Virgos?
It's actually Storm Fairy-Wolf's fault.
Uh-oh.
So a couple years ago, I wrote a blog post, maybe it was last year, where I wrote a parody review of one of Storm's books, and I called it Storm Fairy-Wolf Hates James McAvoy, a Discordian review of The Satyr's Kiss. And it was a very just insane review where I talked about how Storm and I were feuding and we were fighting on Twitter, and I got a copy of the book and I was ready to forgive him because I thought it was going to be like Narnia / fiction. And then it turned out to be a book on queer witchcraft, and I was furious, but it was very irreverent. And right after that review, or right after I posted that review on my blog, Storm messaged me and said, "My editor would like to speak with you." And I was like, "Oh, I've been blacklisted. Okay, this is great. I can work with this." And but his editor reached out to me, and she was lovely, and she asked if I would be willing to be involved in the Sunshine series. And Evo and I had messaged back and forth like months earlier, where he said that he would like me to do it if I could. But I didn't know where the project was going. I hadn't really heard any other details until an editor from Llewellyn asked me to do it, and I agreed, and now I represent every Virgo on the planet. No pressure.
Yeah. So to that end, why are Virgos so difficult?
We are perfectionists, but we hold ourselves to a higher standard than we do everyone else. So we're already holding everyone to an impossible standard that we have to somehow beat. And so however hard it looks that we're being on everyone around us, and as much expectations as we have for everyone else, we have even worse expectations for ourselves that we are rarely able to actually achieve.
And what exactly do Virgos hope to accomplish by being so fucking picky all the goddamn time?
If everyone would just accept that we're right, things would be fine. That's what it boils down to. And we're also incredible control freaks, and we all have anxiety. And so we're trying to control everything and everyone around us, ultimately to keep our own anxiety from going through the roof.
Yeah. Yeah, that's got to be really tough. Do you have any advice for people who love Virgos but find it difficult because you guys are so difficult?
That is a good question. I think that the best advice would be that however annoying we may seem, or however hard we seem to be on everyone else, we are treating ourselves even worse. So treating a Virgo kindly and with something resembling patience and understanding would actually be very appreciated.
Way to make it dark.
That's what I do.
Just goodness. So do you think the mom from American Beauty was a Virgo?
You know, I can see that. She had a very carefully constructed world that she desperately wanted to hold on to.
She gave me Virgo vibes like the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you explain Michael Jackson? He is a famous Virgo, and you have to be able to. Well, we need an explanation. We deserve an explanation, sir.
It really goes back to control, and I will try not to make this as dark as I did earlier, but we have somebody who did not have a lot of control growing up, was under a lot of pressure from a lot of people, and when he hit a point in his career where he could do whatever he wanted, he kept trying to perfect himself, and was always like, I think we're close to the same age. So you remember like the 80s and sleeping in the oxygen tent and all the reconstructive surgeries and stuff, and just trying to achieve an ideal that he had for himself that he was never quite able to reach.
What about Amy Winehouse?
Amy Winehouse. So the one thing that happens with Virgos, and one thing I talk about in the book, is Virgos have a reputation as being neat freaks. And the thing is, we're all horrible slobs. Basically, we try to keep everything in its place. We try to keep everything neat. And if one thing gets out of place, it sets off an avalanche, and we give up because we'll never be able to do it. We didn't do it right the first time. And so I think Amy Winehouse is an example, at least the way she presented herself publicly, of somebody who had just was like, I give up. I can't, I'm always going to be messy no matter what I do. So I'm just going to kind of own the messiness.
I mean, I can have empathy for both of them. I can see how that Virgo-ness is going to make it hard for them to just keep on partying. However, how do you explain Charlie Sheen?
Astrology isn't always correct. There's exceptions. I don't have a good explanation for Charlie Sheen. I
don't think anybody does.
I liked his tiger phase. Wasn't he like calling himself the tiger for a while?
There was tiger. He was like drinking tiger blood. In fact, if we zoom in, the audience can see him consuming tiger blood, which I actually think is probably like V8 or something. But
yeah, but
I wouldn't be drinking tiger blood. That sounds gross. Sounds like you get diseases that way.
Maybe he was born on like a cusp somewhere. Like maybe he's on a Leo cusp, or
maybe. Okay. I hear you making excuses for your fellow Virgos. I understand. Can you please explain this one for me? Ivan the Terrible. How do you explain Ivan the Terrible? I want you have to give us excuses. He did a whole lot, and the world wants repentance.
Virgos are perfectionists, and he's not Ivan the pretty bad or Ivan the meh. He's Ivan the Terrible. Like, he committed.
He was very committed to a lot of horrible things. That's why he was Ivan the Terrible. So is that like a Virgo thing, or are Virgos just committed to terribleness? Is that what you're telling us?
We're committed to, we tend to think that we're always right. And I will say, in our defense, we're correct a lot of the times. We have, we do deal with a lot of anxiety and neuroses. Funny story about that, when I had a check-in meeting with Ivan about halfway through the process of putting together the Virgo Witch book, and he was like, so how's it coming along? And I said, well, I got writer's block, and I freaked out, and I disassociated, and I played on TikTok for a month. And he said, because you're a Virgo. And I was like, oh, okay, I feel better now. But I think that we're not necessarily terrible people, but we do tend to see the world very black and white, and this is the right way to do things, and we have our way of doing it, and we're not always in a place where we can listen to reason about that.
So you just like dial Ivan the Terrible up on the Virgo Astral Network and get writing advice?
Well, I do now. That's a great idea. I'm going to implement that.
Witchcraft works in mysterious ways. I mean, I will say this for Virgos. I mean, out of all the Virgos in the world, at least we have Beyonce and, of course, the amazing Jungkook from BTS. And without these two amazing people, I think all Virgos would be, kind of up a creek. They really do a whole lot when it comes to, correcting the wrongs that were made by Virgo kind on the rest of us. So what's magical or whatever about Virgos exactly? Because I mean, you wrote this book with Evo, right? And
Yes.
so obviously there's got to be something special about Virgos and what Virgos can do that the rest of us can't do, which I don't exactly see what that would be. But what is that thing that Virgos can do that the rest of us can't do? Since you are the representative of all Virgos now.
Yes, I speak for all Virgos. I am the meta Virgo. I think people of every sign have their own unique abilities and their own talents and things that they have a lot of potential at. And that's kind of part of the whole point of the Sun Sign series is to showcase that for everyone. For Virgos, we are surprisingly good at divination. I think that's a skill that a lot of every Virgo witch I've ever met is really good at, like, no nonsense divination. I think that we are surprisingly good listeners, and we're very good at keeping secrets. And so we make really good members of initiatory traditions. Um, we are good about keeping our word. And so if we think in terms of like a witch's word is law, Virgos really resonate with that. Those are the ones that just come up to the top of my head. I'm sure I wrote more in the book about that. Virgos are also very good at, if there's ever a ritual that is starting to go south in whatever way or starting to kind of fall apart, it is inevitably a Virgo who will jump in and steer things back on course.
Or is the Virgo who sabotages it so they can come in and take care of it?
We're not really saboteurs, though. That could like that
I'm
would
kidding.
like that would be amazing. I need to call. I
I'm
need to call
giving
Llewellyn right now.
Virgos a hard time on purpose, everyone. Please, I hope you're laughing.
No, I love that. It's like, stop the presses. I have a chapter to add.
Yeah, no, seriously. Yeah. Crisis management. No, I will say this about Virgo. So getting to the regular show vibe, I'm just giving all the Virgos a hard time because I can. No, I love all my Virgos in my life. They're some of the most special people. And I will say that I got to work at an elementary school like back in the day, and the school secretary, the one who was in charge of everything, basically, she was a Virgo, and she was amazing. Like she was on top of everything, which was like, ugh, right? Like I am not that guy. But she also had, it was her little secret, she had in her top desk of her drawer, she had a little mini tarot deck.
Really?
And she would close her door and she would take her lunch break and she would do these little readings for people, for like the teachers and stuff. And it was like the super secret. And so I remember when she found out, that I did what I do, she got very excited, and we had this amazing moment of connection and just kind of realizing like, okay, yeah, she was a very witchy, not witch. And I find that with all the Virgos I've ever met, they're very witchy, not witches.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, right? If they're not practicing. So there is something really inherently, magical about all of us, right? But like when it comes to the Virgo energy, there is something different. Like, we think of Earth, we think of that kind of thing, but it's not earthy in the way that like the other Earth signs are earthy, right? Yeah. Like there's this interesting thing there. So if you were to put like I often say that like with Sagittarians, we are like, yes, we're fire, but we have a lot of like electrical vibes.
Yeah.
Like we're kind of that. So how would you explain the Earth energy of a Virgo compared to some of the other signs?
So Virgos, we're a mutable sign, and so we are surprisingly adaptable. People think of Virgos as, and even as I was saying earlier, we tend to come across as very set in our ways and one way of doing everything. But we often adapt, and whatever situation we're in, we can modify ourselves to be the most efficient in that situation. It sometimes comes across as like a minor like multiple personality thing, where when I was working at a very conservative company but running a leather club and also practicing witchcraft, I was a very different person in all three of those situations, and I was the person I was supposed to be in those situations. But it wasn't until I ended up kind of in the position I'm in now in life where I could just sort of be all of those things at once versus just having to put on different caps. But we are very good at switching the caps when we need to.
Yeah, no, there's mutability often equals an ability to be like evolve in whatever situation or environment. There's a survivability, right? I mean, and that's a Virgo thing too, because I know like especially back in my hard knock days, that the Virgos were the ones that were getting shit done. Like they
Yeah.
were making sure that, you know, the bills were paid and they had a plan, and there wasn't like they
Mhm.
weren't willing to accept, I think, a lot of stagnancy.
Right.
Like they're yeah, and that was always a really wonderful quality to have around. You kept
Mhm.
the energies and things, you know, kind of stirring around.
Oh, yeah.
So when it comes to when I was writing Witch's Book of Power, I went through each of the signs and I was like, okay, if you have this as your star sign, you're likely to be adept in these skills. If you have this as your moon sign, you're likely to be adept in these skills. I went through the whole freaking birth chart, and I
Mhm.
did that with everything. And what kept coming up over and over again when it came to the Virgo stuff was that I think Virgo energy tends to be some of the like least suspecting. Like people never expect the Virgo to be the one with the candlestick. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
hit the guy over the head. Like they never expect the Virgo. And there's something, because I think of the stability that Virgos do tend to provide to the people. You know, whether
Mhm.
you feel like it inside or not, other people are going to you and they're like, "Hey, you are my rock right now,"
Right.
and that's a lot of pressure to be under. And so
It is.
Virgos have to do magic a lot for a lot of people, I find.
Mhm.
Have you found that your Virgo powers have come in handy when helping another person out with their life or their life situation?
You know, it's funny. I have always been the first to, when somebody comes to me with a problem, or, you know, or wants to do magic, I'm always the one who's like, okay, let's identify the problem. Let's break that down to an intent and a specific desire. I need these 5 herbs, this much pigeon's blood, and, you know, like I can structure everything out, and I get really good results, especially with issues like in doing job magic for people or money magic for people. I always make them participate. I'm never like, oh yeah, I'll just go do this spell for you on the side. I'm always like, we're sitting down together and we are doing this because this is for you, so you are participating. You are putting your effort into this as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I think a lot of Virgos kind of have that same mentality towards magic, where we're the ones who are like, okay, here's what we're doing, here's the plan.
Mhm.
um we're not really good about doing that for ourselves.
That's the trick of it though, right?
Yeah.
Like my favorite thing to talk about in classes is like when we start talking about astrology is, you know, we grow up with these like three like bullet point words that like are supposed to perfectly describe you and your sign and, you know, so on and so forth. And
Mhm.
like Libra is a good example. I'm only going to pick on Libras because it's so simple and it's so perfect. But the idea of balance, right? So
Mhm.
like, you know, Libra is supposed to be balanced. I've never met one Libra that felt like they had their together, and they may or may not, but they don't feel themselves balanced. So like their
Yeah.
thing in life, their, I don't want to say karma, but it is kind of like the lesson in this life tends to be oriented
Yeah.
in the ways of balance and finding balance for themselves. But they're really great at helping other people
Yeah.
find that balance. Just like Sagittarians, like
Mhm.
we're really great at helping other people find their voices and find their power. We're supposed to be charismatic and have all that stuff, but that all
Mhm.
comes from insecurity. That all comes from us feeling like we can't do XYZ, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and we can say this because
that's
I could do this because we're on camera, where when we think of Libra, and that's a really good example, we think of the scales and we think of this
right. Yep.
scales, and scales are
Yep.
growing like this.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
Libras that I've had in my life are, well, if I just fix
Yes.
this thing, wait, no, let me just do this. And
Right.
it's a
Yep.
constant seesaw versus this, you know, this perfect
Yeah.
sense of balance that we associate with it.
Yeah. So I always look at like you know, whenever you see those 3 words that are supposed to perfectly describe your sign, it's more like that's your homework in this
Mhm.
lifetime. And you're probably good at helping other people with that. But when it comes to you, like
Yeah.
all of the Sagittarian stuff, I'm like, nope. Like that is, you know, I can put a face on and go do my thing and, you
Yeah.
know, and do the job. But that isn't necessarily like my personality isn't very Sagittarian. I don't think anyway. I think I'm
Mhm.
more of definitely my rising sign, I think, comes on as I'm getting older, which
Mhm.
is what they say happens. So, you know, that makes sense. But I'm definitely getting more Cancer vibes as I'm getting older.
Is that your
And
rising sign?
that's my rising sign. Yeah.
That is my rising sign.
I think we bonded over this many
We
moons
may
ago.
have.
I think
We
like pre-pandemic.
Yeah, we'll just be Cancer Rising, take over. We'll do a project
Yeah.
together and it'll be called Cancer Rising, and
Cancer
it'll
rising.
be, yeah, it'll be amazing.
Yeah. And then I have Pisces moon. And
Oh,
so I'm like,
I am Pisces moon as well.
Lots. I think that's what it. I think we bonded over this like
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, but then the pandemic happened and whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a lot of like emotional awareness. We'll
Mhm.
just put it that way. We'll just leave it at that. Call it emotional awareness. Like
Yeah.
this week, I'm just burnt out. I posted on Facebook. I was like, hey everyone, I am feeling all kinds of ways that are not myself. Like I don't usually feel like just depressed and gloomy and stuff. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna take some time off and do my thing. And that is how you like how I've learned to survive, because again, as a Sag, there's all this output all the time, easy
Mhm.
to burn through the energy. So as a Virgo, how do you find like keeping, because I know a lot of Virgos that burn themselves out because they are going all the freaking
Yeah.
time, like all the
Mhm.
time. So how do you keep yourself from getting burnout, and what are ways that people who are magically minded, are energetically sensitive, can help recover and recoup when they've been through, you know, the ringer
Yeah.
energetically?
For Virgos, I think our biggest challenge is like when you said, like you said, we go and go and go, and so often that is because people have asked things of us or made requests, and we don't want to disappoint anybody, and we don't want anything to get screwed up because we didn't do our part. So we rarely say no, and we take things on and take things on and take things on, and that's when we burn out, and that's what where we end up feeling like we have failed everyone. So what I had to learn to do is in every aspect of my life is to learn how to say no, and how to kind of maintain that boundary. And it's when people ask me to do something or ask me for a favor, my gut instinct is to always say yes. And part of that is, and this might be all like the wateriness around my other signs, but there's this fear that if I do say no, that's gonna make them angry, or that's gonna make things worse. And sometimes people just have to get a little butthurt. And I am a witch and I'm awesome, but I'm also human and I have my limits.
Yeah.
So, and there's something that I touch on this briefly in the book, but something that has stuck with me for years is something I learned from Baywatch, which is if a lifeguard is dragging somebody in from the ocean and they encounter an obstacle in the ocean, they put the victim between themselves and the obstacle. Because if the victim gets banged up, they're already the victim. Like they're already hurt. So if like a couple extra bruises isn't going to do any damage. If the lifeguard gets injured, they both drown. And so what I have found is that sometimes I just have to put other people between me and the obstacles.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I want to be here for you however I can. However, here are the limitations that we're going to be dealing with today, and here's what I can do, and here's what I cannot, and just
Right.
stick to that.
Right. That's good. So not overloading yourself and kind of knowing where your limit is before you spill over, kind of a
Yes,
thing, and then getting some help when help is needed.
exactly.
Which no one likes to ask for help. I don't know why you're giving that advice.
Because
That's
that's
sad.
I'm giving that advice because Virgos are the worst about asking for help. We are the
Yeah.
absolute worst about it.
Well, it's yeah, because everyone goes to you for help. That's,
Exactly.
it's part of
It's
being a Virgo.
so,
Yeah.
and we because people see us as so dependable, we don't want to let anyone down, and we don't want to admit to ourselves that we can't be perfect all the time. And
Hmm.
asking for help is an admission of imperfection.
Ooh, that's some deep stuff.
Yeah.
Did
It's
you
when
take
I
classes with Oprah or something? Like, damn,
no,
that's
I learned that from recovery, from when I got sober. In fact, at one point, somebody asked me to read a book called The Spirituality of Imperfection.
mm,
And so I went to a bookstore and I found the book, and they had it on a little display. And I went through like 4 or 5 copies because the covers were damaged. And I was like, no, I want one without a damaged cover. And I finally realized that the picture on the cover was a vase with a crack in it.
mm.
And I kept trying to find the book that had the cover without the crack on it
Ah.
because I wanted the perfect book on imperfection. And so,
Hmm.
so even before I read the book, I was like, okay, I think I've learned a valuable lesson here.
Right. Like, I need this book right now. I need to open this book right now.
I don't want to admit that I need the book, but I clearly need the book.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a weird question, just because you were talking about sobriety, and one of the things that I've noticed from my personal life is that
Mhm.
I think out of 10 Virgos, 9 of them have had an addiction issue in their life that they've
Mhm.
recovered from. Like they've all recovered, they've all gotten through it. But like there's something about that like Saturn return time, like right
Mhm.
around there, that just like, you know, plunges people into, you know, crisis. Every sign, right? We all handle
Right.
those things differently. And I imagine, you know, with the personal pressure that a lot of Virgos feel, that like something like addiction is easy to stumble into. I know,
Mhm.
and during that time in my life, I was stumbling in all kinds of dumb shit. So, you
Mhm.
know, like it is what it is. It's living. But there is that empathy there that like I feel like Virgos have, and they go toward substances, right? Like it's
Mhm.
just one of those things we can see. Is there something that if like somebody's struggling, or if they're noticing like, hey, like maybe I'm getting too reliant on a substance to handle the stress or to help me just process my day, you know, things like that. Are there
Mhm.
things that we should be looking for? Are there things that we should just kind of take a step back and just keep an eye on for ourselves, keep ourselves honest and real about that stuff?
You know, it's funny where my initiating high priestess, she's also a Virgo, and when I got sober, I was talking to her about the whole process, and she was like, you know, there was a period where I realized that I was like drinking 2 bottles of wine a day, and so and I realized I was doing that, so I just stopped doing that. And that was sort of the difference between somebody who is not geared towards addiction versus somebody like me who is. Where for me, and I can't speak for like every addict out there, I can just talk about like my own experience. I very much had a stopping problem. And I very much was I wanted to control how I felt. You know, I was dealing at when I at the worst of my own addiction, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress and a lot of things I was very afraid of, and I hated feeling that way. And so drinking was a way to change that. It was a way to have some sort of control over how I felt. The other side to that was that the more I drank to control how I felt, the more unmanageable my life became. And so for me, that was like one of the big wake up calls, is that I have created a situation where I can no longer manage my daily life. Um, and when people have asked me before, because I'm pretty open about being sober, and I've had friends say, "Well, I think I might be drinking too much. What do you think? Do you think I have a problem?" And it's not really my place to say, "Yes, I think you have a problem." It's my place to say, "Well, you know, do you feel like this is causing your life to be unmanageable or causing an issue with you managing the rest of your life?" And you know, and if they say no, then I'm like, okay, well then it might not be the problem you think it is. Or if they say, you know, yeah, it is causing some other problems, I'm like, okay, that's something to look at. Um, but it's ultimately not my place to tell somebody that they have an addiction or that they're dealing with an addiction, because in order for them to start recovering from that addiction, they have to be the one to realize that they have it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's big stuff. I know. Yeah, I mean, I come from a family of people who have struggled with addiction in various forms, and so I've just been hyper aware of it my whole life. But I
Yeah.
know that my personality is such that I absolutely would like. I noticed I had an injury, and I was given some good painkillers, and I
Mhm.
noticed I liked those a little too much, and I was like, no, we got to stop this right. Like my father stumbled into a painkiller addiction
Yeah.
that ended up being fatal for him.
Oh, dear.
And it's one of those things that like you just don't, you know, we're not aware of the things necessarily, and it's very draining, and it takes your power away, you know,
Yeah.
especially as a witch, those things can take your power away. So
Absolutely.
I always appreciate your candor, and your openness when it comes to talking about recovery, because it's ain't no shame, people, ain't no shame, right? Like come on, life is fucking hard, let's get over it. It's, you
Well,
know, so
I
I love that you're
love
open to it.
well, thank you. And I love that you said I took this painkiller and I liked it a little too much, because my response to that sort of stimulus in the past had been, I like this a lot.
Hmm.
And there was not that awareness that, oh, this feels a little too good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah, it
think
was
that's why
definitely
the
like, oh,
difference
like
is,
I didn't need it anymore, but I still had some, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna take it. And like, all right, Devin, stop it. What are you
yeah,
doing? Come on. Yeah, it's like I said, I was lucky in that I had a family who I got to witness their
yeah.
struggles, so I could reflect on that myself and just kind of realize, hey, this is a sign, this is a thing, and be aware of that.
I
But
do have to.
it's
I have to tell a story because
please do.
when you said, oh, I had a couple left over. I was house sitting for some friends years ago. They had like, it was a couple, these two guys that I'd known through recovery, and they had like 5 dogs. They had this giant crazy mansion with 5 dogs, and they were going to be like traveling Europe for a month. They were those gays, right? And so I was going to take care of the dogs. And one day I opened the pantry. I was going to try to throw something together for dinner, and I pulled out a bottle of sherry, a half empty bottle of sherry. And I was talking to and I turned this into like a litmus test. And when I saw the bottle, I was like, oh, they're using this for cooking. They're clearly using this for cooking. And but I was talking to some other people later on, and I went through this with several people. I would say, okay, here's the scenario. I'm house sitting for some people in recovery. I found half a bottle of sherry in the pantry, but they didn't relapse. How do I know they didn't relapse? And every person who was like who'd never dealt with an addiction issue was like, well, maybe it was an old bottle, or maybe they had forgotten the bottle was there, or like it had gone bad. Can sherry go bad? And they were coming up with all these rationalizations. And every person in recovery said, because there was still sherry in the bottle.
Because they're still sharing the bottle. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when you were like, oh, these pills made me feel a little too good, and I had some extras, I was like, you had extras.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. No,
that's an alien concept to me.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's one of these we have to, I think things like this come up in our lives and repeatedly, right? Especially living in the world that we live in today. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of people who are looking for um, things to, as you were saying before, give them control over how they feel. Right.
Right.
And that's so very difficult to find. And, so people, if you fall down, just get back up, and
Mhm.
and it's hard, but there are plenty of us who are cheering you on, right?
Yeah.
Like totally. So
And
1000%.
it's also about trying to be aware of the difference between what we can and can't control.
Hmm.
Which, bringing it back to being a Virgo, that's a very hard thing for me, because I'm like, clearly I
Yeah.
can control everything.
Yeah, but you can't.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
And I know you tried, because I've seen you. I've seen you try. I've seen you do it. So what was this experience like? So I talked to Enfys a little bit about this, and they were just giddy about being able to write it, like just the whole process and everything. They're just, Enfys, super big ball of positivity,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so what was it like for you, like going through the process? So you get this email, you're like, okay, I'll do it. And so now you are the representative for all Virgos.
Right.
And you're also working with Evo, and
Mhm.
Evo had, obviously an idea for where he wanted this to go and how it was going to be laid out. And it's part of a series. So there's that other, expectation of
Yeah.
making sure so what was it like? And did you get to read any of the other ones before you started your process?
I did get to read a little bit of Gemini Witch. And the reason I got to read it was because I messed up one of my sections so badly that the editor sent me somebody else's to look at, so I would get an idea of how to do it correctly. The reason I messed it up was because and I met with Alicia, one of the editors. We had a call, and she said, okay, in this section, every other author wrote about 4 or 5 different topics, and you wrote about 2. And you wrote a whole lot about these 2 topics, but we needed you to write about 4 or 5. And I said, oh, well, the guidelines said pick a couple of topics, so I picked 2. And Alicia was like, I'm changing the guidelines because of you. So part of the process was, for me, was letting go of trying to do everything exactly by the letter and accept things like more as guidelines versus literal rules. Um, I mean, it was down to like, like I think the word count was supposed to be like, 14,000 words, and I wrote 1401. Like I was being incredibly Virgo about the Virgo book. um, when I submitted my first draft, I was so excited and I was like, I've written half a book. I'm the greatest. And then I got the notes back and I was devastated because it wasn't perfect. Um, and I had to set those feelings aside and focus on, okay, what needs to be done to improve this? Because I'd never actually written a book before. So I wrote in the voice and style that I was used to writing in when I blog or when I do like stupid TikToks. And so I had to kind of learn how to create this new voice. Um, but it was very challenging at times, but it was overall a really good experience, and it was really good to be able to um, get the feedback and process the feedback and create something that was more in line in what the ultimate vision was, and to let go of the idea that not everything is always about me.
Right. And what was it like working with in a team setting? I mean, especially as a Virgo.
That Virgos do well in teams. We do surprisingly well in groups. The It made it like, even when I went back and forth a little bit on just, tossed ideas around, and I kind of said, here's kind of my vision for, or here's what I'm thinking for my chapters. What do you think of that? Um, but it was also, I knew he was somebody that I could trust. So it was like the worst thing for a Virgo in school is like when you have to do the group project and not everyone in the group is gonna, so you go ahead and do the whole project yourself because not everybody's gonna participate. It
Mm-hmm.
was like a group project where everybody did their part,
Ooh.
which is like,
Ooh.
oh,
Yeah, that's good. So it was
oh,
actually really fun. You had a good time doing it, and it was
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's good.
I had a
That's
very good
really
time.
good. Yeah, because
And
that doesn't always happen.
yeah, and it was fun getting to know Evo, and it was over time kind of, um I'm good friends with Laura Tempest Zakroff, and I sort of accidentally, when they sent me the Gemini chapters to read, I was like, I recognize that name. So I messaged her and I was like, I'm the Virgo witch, and she was like, I'm the Gemini witch, and we were like, who's the Taurus witch? And it turned into this like secret society of the
That's so
12.
cute. That's so cute. That's so cute. I knew something like that had to have happened because there'd be just little things said online. I was like, they are having way too much fun on this project. Like, just all y'all were having this really fun time on the project.
It was a lot of fun, and it's the nature of the books is that they are fun. These are
Mm-hmm.
not, like, as like dark and dour as I can make Virgo sound. The idea is that this is going to be a fun book. It's something that people will get a kick out of and will learn things about themselves, but also just kind of appreciate, and there's lightheartedness and humor in them as well.
I think I was surprised by them. So I was expecting something kind of dinky, like
Hmm.
just I was like, okay, here we go, an astrology series, and I should have known better because Eva was spearheading it and the
Yeah,
names that he'd picked, and I was, but you don't. I was expecting it to be one of those cute little Llewellyn books, right? And so I was like,
yeah,
okay, here we go. And then I got a copy. Of course, Matt was working on one of them, and so I was, going through this process of like, I think this is something that is really quite cool, actually. Like, there's
yeah,
something kind of amazing that is going on because it goes deeper. Like, you're able to go deeper into things that are specific to each sign in a way that no one has ever been able to do. So it's
yeah,
really cool. And I think that and honestly too, like, even I know it's the sun sign series, but I think like having a Pisces moon, I was able to read the Pisces book and be like, oh, this is badass. Having Cancer rising, I was able to read the Cancer book,
yeah,
or parts of it, and know what's going on with it. And so I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty badass. So I really can't wait to get my hands on that one though. But so there's a lot going. Like, it's very versatile. There's a lot of information in the book, and it's very specific stuff that you're not really going to find anywhere else. So that was
exactly.
really cool. That was
And
really cool.
it's very rare to see, because when we think of an astrology book, we think of somebody talking about all the 12 signs, and
Mm-hmm.
and somebody stepping out of their own sign to write about 11 others. And for the sun sign series, because we're all writing about our individual signs that we have come to know in our own very specific ways, it was a very personal project, but it was also, I think readers are going to relate to it in a much different way, because it's not like some sort of like disembodied voice saying, "Here's who you are, Pisces." It's a Piscean going, "Okay, my fellow Pisceans, we're in this together. Here's what we're all going through, and here's what we can do to get through that."
Yeah. I love this when like the memes go around and you know, and it's like which fictional witch is your sign, and then you can tell who made them because their sign gets the best witch, and you're like,
Mhm.
no, there's no way. You know, yeah, it's
Yeah,
there's something to be said about approaching it from an experiential standpoint and being like, as a
absolutely.
you know, as a Virgo, I know what Virgos go through, and yeah, yeah.
I will say what was the biggest challenge for me was kind of wrestling with and managing to tamp down imposter syndrome.
Mm,
Because when as I was finding out more about the series and who was involved, because
hmm
Evo messaged me and was like, "Hey, I would like you involved in this," and I didn't know who else he was talking to at first. And then when Llewellyn reached out, like officially to bring me on board, I didn't. Again, I was just like, "Oh, it's me and Evo." That's, and I was a little starstruck, but I was like, "Great." And then I learned more about it, and it was like the Sun Sign series with Laura Tempest Zakroff, Matt Arwen, Thorne Mooney, and
hmm
that guy. I was just like,
Ah, come on,
how did I get involved with this?
yeah.
So I just, because this is my first book. This is the first like thing you can buy with my name on it. And
hmm
so I just was like, everyone else sort of has a name and a reputation and a following. And I had to let a lot of that go and just say, okay, this is going to be me, warts and all, which Virgos don't like to admit that we have warts.
No
But we
words.
do. No
Beauty
words.
marks.
No words here.
Yeah.
Yes, beauty. They're all love bumps. They're all love
Everything's
bumps.
exactly. Yeah, no, it's a really, I'm excited about it. I think it's a really great series. There's a lot more meat to it than I thought. And I get outsider syndrome because I struggle with it on a daily basis.
Yeah,
Like it is just what it is. And I don't know an author one who doesn't have even the bestsellers,
oh,
even people
absolutely.
who's sold like outside of our weird little niche, like, you know, like the bestsellers on New York Times, like they all feel the same way. So I think it just kind of comes with the territory, and you know, you don't really get to do the thing until you do the thing, and you just did the thing. So
Yeah,
now you're officially a thing doer,
I'm
and
happy to be a thing doer. But
yeah,
it's Tilda Swinton, who is just a non-binary goddess in her own right.
right.
I heard this interview with her one time, and I think it was like the Arts Hour with Terry Glass or something, or with Fresh Air with Terry Glass, and and they were asking her what her process was for acting, and how do you get into these roles, and how do you create these amazing iconic characters? And she was like, honestly, I just show up and I kind of do stuff, and people think it's good, and I don't know why, and I'm not that great at it, but I don't want to tell anybody that, so I just keep doing it, and they keep letting me. And I was like, oh, she's so human and relatable. I adore
hmm
her.
hmm
But that's one thing that I keep in mind, is that like whenever I'm like, oh, I'm a nobody, I can't do this, I'm like, Tilda Swinton, who played 3 separate characters in Suspiria,
right,
thinks she's a nobody.
right. Yeah, well,
The
Tilda Swinton.
ancient one thinks she's a nobody. So I'm like,
Right.
okay, cool. Then I'm doing
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. No, it's something, like I said, I mean, everyone deals with it. Everyone, you know, kind of goes through their own whatchamacallit. But I know, knowing Evo has a very good sense of discernment.
Yeah,
And, you know, if he reached out, there was a reason. So have a little faith in that
I
you
do.
were, you know, you were asked to participate alongside of these really great people. And that should be your viewpoint, I think. But that's me.
Or my viewpoint could be, clearly the other Virgos were going to screw this up. I have to fix it.
Oh, I mean, that
There's
works
that
too.
too.
Whatever helps you sleep. Whatever helps you sleep at night. I mean, come on, you
Exactly.
know.
That puts me. It's like, it's okay, other Virgos. I've handled it.
Yeah. Thumper's got it. Thumper's got it.
Yes.
So the blog is something you have just been chipping away and working on for a really long time, and it's
Mhm.
matured into this really like, I really love your voice. I love when I get to see your post pop. I've been avoiding social media, so I'm not on it a lot,
Yeah.
but people will like send me your articles and stuff. You're doing really fun stuff, and you're getting personal. You're talking about stuff that a lot of people just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Why are you still approaching, or because at some point we all get kind of niched, we all get kind of I don't know, we, you know, the steam gets let out because we, you
Mhm.
know, you start writing for market, you start writing for an audience, and you kind of stop being able to fill everything with something personal and something real, and yet
Mhm.
you still do that. So where is all this coming from? Where is all this like real personal heart-centered crap that you're doing? Where does this come from? Because even like you have like your post will have like this smart ass like headline, but then you read it and you're like, oh, that was actually really touching. Like, oh my god. So like I adore reading your stuff, but where does this come from? Like, where does this thing inside of you that this heart-centeredness come from? Because you're still a bleeding heart, and I don't know how you're doing it after all these years.
Well, part of it I think is I was very heavily influenced early on when I first was like back when like kind of everyone had a blog, and I was like, well, I don't want a blog because everybody has one, so I want one too. I was really impacted by an author named Jenny Lawson, who runs a website called theblogist.com. And she wrote the most unhinged, insane, hilarious, irreverent stuff that you just not she started out as a mommy blogger, and it just sort of went south, and then she was just writing all this craziness. And then one day she was like, I have crippling depression, and I deal with anxiety, and I have rheumatoid arthritis, and I have any number of health conditions, and sometimes I'm in a wheelchair, and I'm sorry, I just had to get that out. And the response from her readers was like, we're all dealing with stuff too. And she built this amazing little community of people who, appreciated how out there and weird and irreverent she could be, but who really appreciated her for how honest she could be. So when I started writing on a platform that people were actually reading, I wanted to be able to be that honest as well. I didn't just want to sort of create a social media character. I didn't want to have followers. I wanted to have like compatriots and people who understood what I was saying. But I also wanted people to know that like when I wrote about witchcraft or religion or anything, that I really was being honest and earnest about it, and that I wasn't just trying to come up with something because it sold. That I was, sharing the things that I truly cared about. And part of the way I can show that the witchcraft and the paganism and all that is legit is by saying, and this is who I truly am as well, and being honest about myself as well.
Yeah. I keep finding myself having this discussion kind of over and over again with people, where we're talking about like just writing about witchcraft, writing about your spirituality, writing about occultism, however, which angle you want to kind of approach it, whether you're doing it as a book or you're doing it as a blog, you're really opening yourself up like it's a very like personal thing. And so it's hard to like the thing that I think I've struggled with, and it took me a long time to figure out that this is what it was, would be like, okay, so I'm writing this book and nothing I say am I thinking is the final word on anything. Like I'm just saying, this is what I do. And then you'll get like, a review or somebody, well, my mustache is very itchy all of a sudden. And then you get a review and it's somebody saying, oh, I disagree with them. And I'm like, I don't give a if you disagree with me on anything. Like I didn't write it because this is a definitive guide to anything. Yeah. Like that's not what I'm. So I really find it difficult like to be that open and engaging all the time. Like I found that over the years I have a bandwidth where I can be that as a writer. I can't necessarily be that as a social media person, because social media is people read social media assuming the worst intent. Period. Like, and I don't mean to do it. We all do it, right? I do it. I catch myself doing it all the time, where I'm assuming this person means the most horrible possible take on whatever it is that they're saying. People is like, I got accused of shaming somebody's body this week, and I'm like, I deleted the post because I was like, that is not at all what was going on. It was but it was also really hard to explain outside of the context of the situation, know. So it's this thing where it's like you're expected to be open and authentic and real, but that requires this level of vulnerability that is really difficult to have with the public. And so when we're, whether you're writing books or you're writing a blog or whatever, you have to approach things from this really sensitive kind of place. And it's difficult. And people don't get that. People do not understand that. They think you're trying to sell them a bill of goods, and that is not what is going on. you know, like it's hard. So I commiserate with that, because I see the authenticity coming out of the stuff that you're writing about.
Yeah.
And I know as a writer, that's got to be hard. That's got to be difficult to do.
But it's stuff that I have already like processed and accepted. Like, even if I'm writing about something kind of painful, or and like my last blog post got some kind of angry feedback just because of the nature of the topic. And I talked about a situation and how I had to handle it and how my hands were kind of tied. And it was like, yes, I'm an all-powerful witch, but sometimes I still have to freaking play by the laws of retail. And I had, you know,
Right.
and I got some comments of people that were just like, well, you handled that terribly and you're a horrible person. Fortunately, it's a blog, so I can go back and read it and go, okay, here's where I misspoke, and I can tweak this and fix this to make sure that it's as clear as possible, which is a wonderful thing about blogging, is that you can always go back and be like, I didn't say that.
Right.
But you know, the negative feedback didn't really have much of an impact on me, or didn't hurt my feelings, because by the time I was ready to write the post and put it up, I'd already worked through it. You know, so I could be honest, but I was also very much at a place of acceptance with it.
Yeah.
And a long time ago, I realized that regardless of what I say, or how funny I think it is, or how eloquent I'm being, it's not going to make everybody happy.
Right.
And I wrote a post one time, and it was a post about going to a Greek festival with a couple of coven mates and finding this little statue that was supposed to be the Virgin Mary but looked like Princess Leia. And I posted a picture of it, and the post ended up being about like, I've got this wonderful souvenir of this wonderful time I spent with my brothers. So it was sort of an aw at the end, right? And I got 2 comments on that post, and one comment was like, it was like, great post, and the next comment was, this is disgusting. And I was like, I cannot help but appreciate the yin and yang in this situation. And you know, I don't know what it was that somebody thought was disgusting, but that's legit. Like, they didn't like it, and that's okay. And nothing I could have said in that post would have made that any different.
Would have made it any better. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's how I feel about my book reviews. Like, I try not to read them in general, but definitely I like, there's one sitting on my Crystal Magic book right now on Amazon that I'm just like, this is absurd. But the person's like, you know, saying I'm writing about fan fiction and just like all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, okay, clearly, like, when you take the time to write more than a paragraph for a review, you have an agenda. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. You've come there for, you know, to do something probably shitty. And so, you know, it doesn't matter if I'm reading, you know, fiction book reviews from people, or I'm reading nonfiction reviews. If somebody will come in with multiple paragraphs, if you cannot summarize your thoughts, then it's a blog, right? And then they drop their blog on a review, and it's just like, whoa. So you get those things where I just assume, especially because of the nature of the stuff we're talking about, that like, it's just not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. Like, whatever. But still, just getting yourself like prepared to go do the thing it's hard. It's just hard.
That was something I included in the, I don't know if this is a spoiler or a teaser, in the manuscript I'm submitting tonight. But I was like, I know that because I'm going to talk about this particular subject, I am going to get 1-star reviews on Amazon from some people, and that's okay. But here's why I'm writing about it, and here's what I hope to achieve, and here's what I want my readers to think about. So if you're cool with shifting your perceptions on things, that's wonderful. And if you're going to write the 1-star review, like, thanks for the purchase.
Then there you go. Yeah, exactly. And that's it too. I mean, you know, like, well, you've already spent your money, so thanks for that. Yeah, that's really cool. So, I mean, we're about that time. So where do you send people these days if they want to find out all about you and they want to keep this conversation going? Where are you sending people?
I send them to thumperforge.com. That's got links to the thumperforge.com. It's got links to the blog, to all my social media, to books that I've contributed to. Like, it's all in one happy place.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us here on Modern Witch, and for letting me grill you about Virgoness.
You're very welcome.
It was definitely appreciated. All right, everybody. I will be back with more lives, I think, next week. And until then, stay cool, stay nice, and be kind to yourselves and others.
Good advice.
Yeah. We can end the broadcast.